I don't think Tavistock should make children reconsider what they're saying. I don't think it's a gender clinic's job to make trans people reconsider their transness.
I have some great news. The Tavistock Clinic in North London has been accused of rushing teenagers into a life-altering treatment on hormone-blocking drugs, The Times reported. An independent review led by pediatrician Dr. Hilary Cass was also highly critical of the Tavistock's Gender Identity Development Service. The closure means the UK will no longer have a dedicated gender clinic for under 18s, but new regional centers will be set up to ensure the holistic needs of vulnerable young patients are fully met, according to the NHS England. The clinic is being shut down after a review. Chief Cass concluded in a recently published report that the Gender Identity Development Service was not a safe or viable long-term option. Amazing. We're now finally thinking of other options for vulnerable and confused kids than giving them medicine, blindly giving them medicine. It also means that we can prevent more detransition stories from happening. Speaking of that, today I'm going to react to a video by Finch, who is a famous trans YouTuber. He reacted to the case of Kira Bell, a female to male to female detransitioner who actually sued the Tavistock Clinic for medical malpractice.
I would have liked to have, some sort of intensive therapy, really. I think that I should have been challenged on the proposals or the claims that I was making for myself.
See, I don't think that's a fair statement to make. You should have been challenged on the statements that you were making about yourself. Challenged, I feel like, isn't the correct word, because if you go to a doctor, you go to someone to seek help, and you tell them something about yourself that, you're yourself, you know yourself the best. If you tell them something about yourself, they're not going to be like, well, I challenge that.
No, going to the doctor, they don't usually give you medicine just because you ask for it. To claim, I know best who I am, therefore, I'm gonna decide what treatment I should undergo, is not logical. Name another group in society that blindly receives any form of medical treatment based on their own diagnosis. The point of going to a clinic with doctors is to seek help, to get a second opinion that's objective, because us patients with mental health issues, we are not doctors, first of all, but second of all, we don't know what treatment we should receive. And we certainly, because of our mental health issues, do not always know ourselves the best.
I understand that maybe you should have considered things more. Well, obviously you should have considered things more because now you detransitioned, but I don't want to put the blame on anyone, but realistically you went to these people to seek treatment, so that's what they gave you.
It's 100% the doctor's fault. Are you kidding me? A doctor who gives drugs and/or operates on a patient that is a child based on the child's own judgment and self-diagnosis is incompetent as hell. And to say that it's the underage patient's own responsibility goes against all principles that applies to any other medical treatment. They should have challenged her. She was a minor, 16 years old. It's unacceptable giving medicine to stop a perfectly physically healthy, normal 16-year-old's development just because at one point they wanted to.
There will be young people who say going to the clinic literally saves their lives. What would you say to that?
Well, I did say the same thing, years ago when I went to the clinic. It felt like, it was saving me from, suicidal ideation and just depression in general. And, at the time I felt like it relieved all of those mental health conditions that I was, struggling alongside, gender dysphoria. It's something you need to kind of work through, but it's not something that should be rushed into.
If I didn't transition at the point I transitioned, my life would be ridiculously different. I don't know how I would have dealt with it, because by the time I transitioned, I was already on the edge. I just feel like, I was completely sure of myself, I was incredibly sure of myself, and that's something that I needed at that point in my life.
Good for you. I mean, fuck all the other former gender dysphoric girls who now can't have babies, can't have a functional sex life, can't have orgasms, permanently have a deep voice, and unwanted facial hair. As long as you're happy with your decision, with your transition, why should we care about all the other cases, right? The inability for you to push your own ego aside in order to care or consider other people's suffering is so sad. When all long-term studies done on gender dysphoric children conclude that between 60 to 90% of the kids do not identify as trans as adults, providing a medical transition to kids will only benefit very few people. So your story, Noah, doesn't really matter. You have to think about the bigger picture here. It's absolutely irresponsible to provide a treatment with a 60 to 90% failure rate to minors who already cannot consent. I think we're better than that as a rich, resourceful Western society.
Like, by the time that you've gone to a clinic, you've referred yourself to a clinic, you've gone to your GP, you know, to talk about the fact that you're trans, you've already considered that. Like, you don't just go there if you're like, oh, maybe I could be trans. You go there because you're like, okay, well, I think I'm trans.
There's definitely a big group of people who approach trans clinics without giving it a lot of thought. I mean, it's kids that we're talking about. Of course, some have considered transitioning before approaching the clinics, but a child cannot comprehend the side effects and the consequences of it all. And that should be an obvious truth. How generalizing and incorrect to claim that every trans-identified kid has the maturity to know that they're really trans and will benefit from the life-altering decision that a medical transition is.
Rushing into it is a different thing for every person. Maybe she rushed into it.
What would you tell your 16-year-old self now?
That's a hard question, because I mean, I feel like I could say anything to my 16-year-old self, but you know, I might not necessarily listen at that time, and that's kind of the point of this case, is that, you know, when you are that young, you don't really want to listen to anyone, and a lot of things won't get through.
I feel like a lot of this interview is just her projecting herself onto, like, every other person that went through a similar experience. Not everybody who's 16 doesn't want to listen to people. Maybe that's a thing that you experience, but I know that when I was 16 and I was talking to people about similar kind of things, I listened to what they thought about it. Like, sure, I knew for a fact that I was trans, I knew that that was a thing, but I still considered things people told to me.
The victim blaming is shining through in this video. Almost every single 16-year-old, trans-identified or not, do not listen to adults in their lives. I mean, isn't that the point of being a teenager? Being a rebel and being stubborn? I think it's symptomatic that Noah and other trans activists like him use their own anecdotal experiences as an argument rather than sticking to real statistics and just to logic in general. You and I will, no matter how much gatekeeping there is, get the medical transition. Our gender dysphoria will not vanish by doctors being critical of us, asking critical questions. But for so many kids nowadays who are not really trans, it is the case. And that is why we need gatekeeping.
I think it's up to these, you know, institutions like the Tavistock to step in and make children reconsider what they're saying.
I don't think Tavistock should make children reconsider what they're saying. I don't think it's a gender clinic's job to make trans people reconsider their transness. I don't think that's their job. I think maybe they should talk it through with them and, you know, maybe be like, is this how you feel? Is this how you feel? Or maybe you feel like this because of this. I don't feel like reconsider is the word.
A gender identity clinic should not be a clinic where they hand out medical transitions to anyone who asks for it, especially not to children. It should be a clinic with professionals who specialize in gender dysphoria, will provide professional psychological help, and will only offer a medical transition to adults as the last resort.
I feel angry that, you know, no one was there to really say any different, and I was allowed to run with this idea that I had, or, you know, almost like a fantasy as a teenager. I was allowed to run with that.
Okay, like, I get that. If I was in her situation, I would be angry too, but I also feel like she's putting a lot of blame on the services that are put there to help people.
Tavistock can claim all they want that they're a clinic wanting to help children, but the second they become guilty of medical malpractice and of condemning healthy children to a lifetime on medication, that claim means nothing to me anymore. Absolutely nothing.
It clearly wasn't the right route for you to go down, but I don't think it's fair to blame the fact that you regret transitioning on Tavistock.
Oh, so rather blame the child on being medicalized for life than the adults who did this to her.
It's not like you go to a gender clinic appointment and you're just like, I'm trans, put me on hormones, because believe me, that is not what happens. Insinuate that these clinics are just like fast-tracking these kids onto hormones, because that's not what happens.
Well, yeah, to many people that is what happens. I've heard hundreds of times how, especially young girls, they can get testosterone after 1 hour consultation. And you simply cannot deny it just because you don't like how it sounds.
I just feel like there has to be some responsibility taken on your side, and I don't feel like there is any.
All I hear is, the skirt was too short. Do you know what I'm referring to? There must be something deeply wrong with you if you can blame a child, a teen girl, on looking like this now, than the adults who did this to her. I can't react to this anymore. Thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you liked my reaction. Remember to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Peace out.